In February 1970, Sylvester Stallone was 2 days away from being evicted. He sat in his studio apartment in New York City, barely 200 square feet, a room with a hot plate and a shared bathroom down the hall, holding an eviction notice. He owed $220 in back rent. His landlord had been patient, but patience had expired. Stallone had $11 to his name, $11. Not enough for rent, not enough for food beyond a few days. Not enough for anything, except maybe a bus ticket back to Philadelphia. Back to failure. Back to admitting everyone had been right about his impossible dream. He was 24 years old. He'd been in New York for 6 months, chasing an acting career that had produced exactly 0 jobs. He'd auditioned for everything: theater, commercials, industrial films, student projects. Nothing. His crooked face and slurred speech made him unemployable. Tomorrow he'd be homeless. That night, Stallone saw an ad in the back of a newspaper. Actors needed for film production, $200 cash. No experience necessary. He called the number immediately. The film production was softcore pornography. The production company, if you could call it that, made cheap exploitation films that played in grindhouse theaters and adult bookstores. Not hardcore pornography that was still mostly illegal in 1970, but softcore simulated sex scenes, nudity, the kind of content that existed in the gray area between legitimate cinema and actual pornography. The producer, a man in his 40s working out of a shabby office in Times Square, explained the project. They needed a male lead for a film called The Party at Kitty and Studs. 2 days of filming. Mostly simulated sex scenes with an actress named Henrietta Holmes. $200 cash, paid immediately after filming. You comfortable with nudity? The producer asked. Sex scenes? Stallone sat there, thinking about the eviction notice. About sleeping in Port Authority. About giving up and going home. About the shame of failure versus the shame of this. Yes, he said. Uncomfortable. He wasn't. But he needed the money. The Italian Stallion, as it would later be retitled, was filmed in 2 days in a cheap apartment in Manhattan. The set was someone's actual apartment, probably rented for the shoot. The crew consisted of maybe 5 people: director, cameraman, sound guy, and a couple of assistants. The budget was microscopic. The script, such as it was barely 10 pages of loose scenario and improvised dialogue. Stallone's character, Stud, was a dim-witted party-goer who has sex with Kitty, Henrietta Holmes, in various scenarios. The plot was virtually non-existent. It was just a framework for sex scenes. The filming was awkward and humiliating. Simulated sex requires physical intimacy with a stranger, while a crew of people watch and give directions. Move your hand higher. Angle your body toward the camera. Make it look more passionate. Stallone did what he was told. He needed the money. He couldn't afford dignity. Henrietta Holmes was professional about it. She'd done this before, knew the routine, treated it like any other job. But Stallone was mortified. This wasn't acting. This was prostituting himself in front of a camera, creating a permanent record of his desperation. Between takes, he barely spoke to anyone. He just wanted it to be over. After 2 days, the filming wrapped. The producer handed Stallone $200 in cash. Stallone took the money, left immediately, and went straight to his landlord's office to pay the back rent. He had $20 left over, enough for food for maybe a week. He told himself it was worth it. He'd avoided eviction. He'd survived another week in New York. He could keep auditioning, keep pursuing his dream. But mostly he felt shame. Deep, nauseating shame. He told no one about the film. Not his wife, he was briefly married at the time. Not his friends. Not other actors he knew. It was a secret he intended to take to his grave, a desperate mistake made in a desperate moment. Something that would disappear into the obscure world of grindhouse pornography and be forgotten. For 6 years, that's exactly what happened. The Italian Stallion, originally titled The Party at Kitty and Studs, played in a handful of adult theaters in New York and Detroit, made no money, and disappeared into obscurity. Stallone moved on with his life, continuing his struggle to make it as an actor. Then came Rocky, November 1976. Rocky opened to massive success. Within weeks, Sylvester Stallone went from unknown actor to one of the most famous men in America. His face was on magazine covers. He was nominated for Academy Awards. He was the embodiment of the American dream, the underdog who made it against impossible odds. And then, in January 1977, someone recognized him. A distributor of adult films was cataloging old inventory, going through reels of forgotten exploitation films. When he came across the party at Kitty and Studs, he recognized the male lead immediately. That distinctive face, that slurred speech, that muscular build. That was Sylvester Stallone, the star of Rocky, in a porn film. The distributor immediately understood what he had, a potential goldmine. The film was re-released in February 1977 as The Italian Stallion. New title, new marketing. New posters featuring Stallone's name in huge letters. See Rocky before he was Rocky. The promotional campaign was shameless. The film Hollywood doesn't want you to see. The movie they tried to bury. It wasn't true, nobody had tried to bury it. It had just been a forgotten low-budget exploitation film. But now, with Stallone's fame, it became valuable. The Italian Stallion opened in adult theaters across the country. Lines formed around blocks. People packed theaters to see the Oscar-nominated star of Rocky in a softcore porn film. It made hundreds of thousands of dollars, far more than the original release. For Stallone, it was a nightmare. The media storm was immediate and brutal. Tabloids ran headlines, Rocky's porn past, Stallone's X-rated secret, The Italian Stallion's dirty movie. Talk shows invited him on specifically to ask about the film. Journalists brought it up in every interview. Late-night comedians made jokes. His clean-cut Rocky image, the lovable underdog, the American hero, was being destroyed by a decision he'd made in desperation 6 years earlier. Stallone tried to handle it with honesty. In interviews, he didn't deny making the film. He explained the circumstances. He was broke, facing eviction, desperate. He did it for $200 because he needed to survive. He wasn't proud of it, but he didn't regret the choice. It kept him in New York, kept him pursuing his dream, and eventually that dream came true. I was starving, he told one interviewer. Literally starving. I did what I had to do to survive. I'm not ashamed of being desperate. I'm ashamed that I had to make that choice, but I'd rather be ashamed than homeless. Most people understood. Stallone's honesty and vulnerability actually strengthened his underdog image. Here was a man who'd literally done anything, including compromising his dignity, to pursue his dream. But some people didn't understand. Conservative groups called for boycotts of Rocky. Religious organizations condemned him. Some theaters pulled Rocky from screenings. Family groups protested. The controversy threatened to derail his career just as it was starting. United Artists, the studio that distributed Rocky, was furious. They hadn't known about the porn film. Nobody had. Now their Oscar-nominated, family-friendly boxing film was being associated with pornography. There was talk of reshooting Rocky with a different actor and re-releasing it. There was discussion of legal action against Stallone for not disclosing the film's existence. Studio executives seriously considered trying to bury his career before it went any further. Stallone was devastated. He'd worked his entire life for this moment. The success of Rocky, the recognition, the opportunity, and it was being destroyed by a mistake made in desperation years earlier. He later said this period was darker than being broke and homeless. When I was starving in New York, I had hope. I believed things could get better. But when the porn film came out, I felt like I was being punished for surviving. Like the universe was saying, you don't deserve success because of what you did to get here. His wife considered leaving him. His family was embarrassed. Some friends distanced themselves. The shame was overwhelming. Then something unexpected happened. The controversy faded. Partly because Stallone's honesty neutralized the scandal, he didn't make excuses. Didn't lie, just admitted to a desperate choice in a desperate time. Partly because Rocky continued to be enormously successful, and audiences separated the character from the actor's past. But mostly because the film itself, when people actually watched it, was embarrassing but not truly scandalous. It was awkward, poorly made, and yes, there was nudity and simulated sex, but it wasn't hardcore pornography. It wasn't violent or degrading. It was just sad, really. A desperate young man doing whatever it took to survive. Watching The Italian Stallion didn't make people hate Stallone. It made them pity the person he'd been in 1970, broke, facing eviction. So desperate that he'd compromise his dignity for $200. The film actually reinforced his underdog story. This was a man who'd been so low that he'd done porn for rent money and still fought his way to the top. By mid-1977, the scandal had largely blown over. The Italian Stallion continued to play in adult theaters, making money off Stallone's fame. Stallone received no additional compensation. He'd been paid $200 in 1970, and that was it. The film's owners made hundreds of thousands, eventually millions over the years, while Stallone got nothing except humiliation. He tried to buy the rights to the film to bury it permanently. The owners wanted $1 million. Stallone, despite Rocky's success, didn't have that kind of liquid cash yet. The deal fell through. For decades, The Italian Stallion remained available first in grindhouse theaters, then on VHS, then DVD, then on various internet platforms. Every few years, a new distributor would acquire it and market it to a new generation. See Rambo before he was famous. Stallone's shocking secret: it never went away. It became a permanent part of his history, something that would be mentioned in his obituary someday, an indelible stain. In interviews over the years, Stallone's attitude toward the film evolved. In the immediate aftermath, 1977-1980, he was defensive and ashamed. He answered questions about it, but clearly hated discussing it. In the 1980s and 1990s, he became more philosophical. He'd acknowledge it as a mistake made in desperation, part of his journey, something he wasn't proud of but also wasn't going to pretend didn't happen. By the 2000s and 2010s, he'd achieved enough distance to discuss it with dark humor. "I did porn for $200, he joked in one interview. Which means I'm either the cheapest or the most expensive porn star in history, depending on how you calculate it. But underneath the humor, the wound remained. In a 2012 interview, Stallone became emotional discussing the film. "People think it's funny now, and maybe it is. But making that film was one of the lowest points of my life. Not because of what I did, I'd do anything legal to survive. But because of what it represented, total desperation. The feeling that you're so worthless, your dignity is worth $200. He paused, collecting himself. Every actor who struggled understands. You reach a point where you'll do anything, absolutely anything, and you hope nobody remembers. But I got famous, so everyone remembered. The lasting impact of The Italian Stallion is complex. On one hand, it humanized Stallone. It proved his underdog story was real. He hadn't been broke in a metaphorical sense. He'd been broke enough to do porn for rent money. That authenticity made Rocky even more powerful. On the other hand, it created a permanent stain on his reputation. Conservative groups never fully forgave him. Family-friendly brands were hesitant to work with him. Some roles were off-limits because of his pornographic past. The film also set a precedent in Hollywood. If you're desperate enough to make bad choices, and you later become famous, those choices will haunt you forever. The past is never really past when you're a public figure. For young actors today, Stallone's experience is a cautionary tale. Desperation can force you into decisions that seem survivable in the moment, but create permanent consequences. In 2016, a film student asked Stallone, "If you could go back to 1970, would you still make The Italian Stallion?" Stallone thought carefully before answering. That's an impossible question because it assumes I had choices. I didn't have choices. I had $11 and an eviction notice. The choice was, do this and survive another week, or be homeless and probably leave New York and give up on acting forever. Would I prefer that film didn't exist? Of course, it's embarrassing. It's a permanent reminder of my lowest moment. But I survived that moment. And surviving that moment allowed me to write Rocky. So in a weird way, that $200 porn film is why Rocky exists. The universe has a sick sense of humor sometimes. My greatest shame enabled my greatest achievement. Today, the Italian Stallion remains easily available online. Anyone can find it with a simple search. It's been uploaded to countless websites, shared endlessly, viewed by millions of people curious to see Stallone's pre-fame desperation. He can't erase it. He can't buy the rights and destroy every copy. It's too widely distributed now. It's permanent. But so is Rocky, so is Rambo, so is a 50-year career that made him one of the most recognizable humans on Earth. The porn film haunts him. But the characters he created after surviving that desperation have inspired hundreds of millions of people. In the final accounting, what matters more? The 2-day mistake made in desperation, or the 50-year career built from surviving that desperation? Stallone's answer is clear. I'd rather be remembered for Rocky than that porn film. But I earned Rocky by surviving the moment that forced me to make that porn film. You don't get redemption without something to be redeemed from. The Italian Stallion is Stallone's original sin, the choice he made when he had no choices. It's shameful. It's embarrassing. It's permanent. And without it, there might be no Rocky Balboa. Sometimes the path to greatness runs through the gutter. Sylvester Stallone walked that path, and the world watched him do it, both the gutter and the greatness. That's the price of becoming an icon when you started with nothing. Your nothing becomes part of your legend.